Hi, you're listening to Collectively Speaking by the Birthday Collective, a bottom-up initiative to develop ideas about Singapore's future. Welcome to this space, where Birthday Book alumni have conversations about the things that matter to them, to us, and to Singapore. We hope that you will be a part of the many conversations we will have, or perhaps to even start your own. And now, onward with the episode.
Welcome to Collectively Speaking. I'm Cherie, your host for today's very special episode called Episode 0, The Origin Story. In the studio today, we have three very important guests. We have Aaron Maniam, Malminderjit Singh, and James Chan, and we'll hear about why they're so critical to the Birthday Collective. But if you ask anyone in the Birthday Collective, we have a very special origin story, kind of like a myth that we like to talk about that started at the back of a cab. I know they say that what happens at the back of a cab should stay at the back of a cab, but some stories are worth telling. So, Mel, I'm gonna ask you first, since you were at the back of the cab, what happened and why?
Well, it's a very scandalous start, Cherie, so I'm not sure if you're going to go down that path, but it was a dark, lonely night.
And yet you were not alone.
I was not alone. I was in the back of a cab with Aaron. Actually, we were coming back from a meeting at Cinda, where we both were volunteering, and we had been volunteering for some years. So we were coming back, and as usual, since we live close by to each other, we regularly hitch a ride back together. And I had a thought that I had been stewing over for the last couple of days, and I thought, I'll share it with Aaron, as I normally do when I have ideas, I treat him as a sounding board in that regard. And one of the things that struck me, that was SG50 year, it was 2015. And one of the things that struck me was that, and there's a lot of literature coming out in Singapore about SG50, about the 50th anniversary, a lot of books, a lot of activities and events planned out as well. And it was interesting because a lot of talk was happening about the nation's history, how it had come so far. There was also some talk about the future, what the next 50 years might look like. And what struck me was that a lot of the people who are talking about a nation's future, unfortunately, may not even be around in that future. What I'm alluding at is that a lot of younger voices, a lot of younger people who were obviously going to be the stakeholders of the nation's future, of that next 50 years, were absent, conspicuously absent. And I thought that was something that needed to be fixed. That was one of the sparks that got me thinking about what can be done so that we give a platform for younger voices in Singapore to talk about their hopes and aspirations for what they want to see Singapore look like as well down the road. And I think that's very critical going forward. And we certainly see that now as well. The other thing also was that we felt that there was a middle ground that was missing in Singapore, and there needed to be a space where reasonable voices, objective voices, could come out and say their piece without being shot down, whichever stand they took. And so with these thoughts, I went to Aaron and we discussed on our ride back home, and he had a brilliant thought, of course, of putting it together in a book and saying, why don't we get a collection of essays together, putting in a book. And I had not done a book till then. He, of course, had been a published author and a published poet. I had not done a book at all till then, and I was daunted. But I knew that if there's anyone I could do a book with, that Aaron would be the right choice for me. So I put faith in his conviction, and I put trust in him, as I normally do. And I said, yeah, let's go along with this journey.
So, Aaron, you obviously heard this, and then your brain went into like, okay, you went from Mel had an idea to we're going to write a book. What was that, literally, what was that journey like? And, what was in your head, what were your thoughts?
So there were a few things that went through my head. The first thing was I loved the idea of gathering voices, but it did strike me that I didn't want to just do a one-off project. There were lots of one-off projects in 2015 for SG50, and they were wonderful, very meaningful projects. But I did think that if we did something, we should do something different. And we should not just have a one-off thing, we should have an institution that we can build up. So I actually had it in my head that this shouldn't just be one book, it should be a series of books. I could see the covers or the spines in my head, actually. Just after 10 years, we'd have 10 books. And I thought, what a wonderful repository that would be for all the ideas that people are having about Singapore and our future. So that was one thought, right? That it shouldn't just be a one-off, it should happen in a sustained way. And then we started brainstorming, well, what should we call it then, And we figured, well, why don't we call it the birthday book? Because birthday books can happen every year. We will do it as a book to celebrate the National Day each year, and it would become this birthday present that the number of writers would give to Singapore. And then almost as a natural thought, we said, well, if that's the case, then there should be a growing number of writers each year. The number of writers should change with Singapore, and what better number to have than Singapore's age? So 51 writers for 51 years, 52, 53, and 54 after that. And then just to be ambitious, we thought, well, maybe we shouldn't repeat any names for a while at least, just to make sure that we kept looking for new voices and new vitality.
You guys picked 2016 then to have your book instead
That's
of 2015.
Yep.
Why 2016 and not 2015?
Well, because honestly, it was a practical thing. We didn't think we could get a book going in a few months, but to do it in a year or so seemed more or less practical. So 2016 seemed like the right way to do it. And again, that helped us to get away from the 2015 fiesta of many, many ideas, but actually help us to start building something in a much more sustainable way.
Okay,
One thing that we had to do, of course, was to make sure we were practical about this. And so the first thing we did was list out all the writers that we could think of who would have interesting things to say. And one of them, was someone, a really dear friend, who we thought would have interesting thoughts about technology and the kind of future there would be in Singapore's private sector, right? What kind of corporate energy there could be in a long-term Singapore outcome. And so we approached James to be part of the collective, hoping that he would write us a piece, in his usual, interrogative and inquisitive style. And when we approached him, he gave us the most wonderful surprise because he then said to us, how are you going to fund this?
And he didn't just write you an essay then.
Exactly. He didn't just write us an essay. And to this day, I wonder, what guardian angel was smiling on us that someone was that interested in the project. And James, I feel like you should tell us a bit about why you chose to get involved as well. Because what was an idea became a genuinely rooted, concrete project once you got involved in it.
James, you are a venture capitalist by trade almost, right? I mean, you invest in things that you think have potential and growth, and you chose to invest in the Birthday Collective on top of giving them an essay, which is sizable. And I think you've, from what we've gathered, allowed the project to take on a life of its own. Maybe we can hear your take of it and your vantage point.
Sure. Thanks, Cherie. And thanks for the setup, Aaron. Looking back, it's been 5-ish years.
Yep.
Looking back at that fateful meeting with you guys, I think what struck me the most in coming up with all these follow-up steps to turn an idea into a rooted reality was this desire to see more from our society, more from our people, more from the country. And the only way that could have happened, my take on it at least, as an ex-public servant, followed by then a venture capitalist and then an entrepreneur, right? You take the twin traditional actors of capital and labor, right? And then you put them together and you create something with it lasting. And that's when I said, what, you just want me to write an essay? Well, I think I could do more, right? I think I could help you guys seed the initial capital to get the print runs going. And hey, guess what? None of you are businessmen, right? So let me put that business hat on and think about how we could complete the triumvirate and turn this into something that can go beyond us, into this amazing time capsule that generations after us can benefit from, a movement that is more than us, that can go beyond time and let anybody select what they resonate most strongly with in this massive, exponentially compounding collection of voices and stories to come.
I know being self-funded is a very core, tenet that you guys hold at the Birthday Collective, right? I'm sure people have offered organizations, some with a bit more strings, have offered to give you money to publish this book. Why is it so important for you to be self-funded? And why do you continue for all your publications to still be that?
I'll take a quick stab at that. I think what's important is that we have a space that allows for a range of independent voices to come out. Mel mentioned the importance of the middle ground, right? So not just cheerleading voices, not just super critical voices, but voices that have an optimistic but realistic view of the future. And I think the best way for us to do that is to maintain a certain amount of independence. And that allows us, I think, to then create a space for multiple voices.
I think scarcity in itself also drives inventiveness. Having it being, it's like basically, when you have less oxygen but you still have enough to survive, you learn to be a lot more inventive and resourceful with what we need to do. As a fully volunteered organized community, we need to then find ways to leverage on each other's know-how, expertise, connections to get there.
Tell me again, I mean, it's called Birthday Collective, not an organization or an institution. I know you talk about the book and the project being that, but what do you mean by collective? I mean, it's a very odd thing in Singapore, right? A lot of things are very structured. There are all these organizational charts. So who's the boss?
There is no boss.
Backtrack. So how is a collective and no boss? How does it work?
Well, it's a collective because the energy comes from everybody who gets involved in it.
Yep.
Every writer who has come in has given us a different kind of contribution or different sort of energy. And it's an entirely self-driven process, right? People come in and they've given us essays. In James's case, he contributed so much more beyond that. Other people have come in and said, I've done an essay, now I want to produce videos based on the essays. Even the podcast that we're doing now was started by one writer and one potential writer for the future who have said, we have an idea and we want to make that happen. And I think that kind of self-driven nature and that distributed leadership model is really key, that this is not hierarchical, that it isn't about one person's ideas or a few people's ideas. It's everybody's ideas coming together.
So one of the things that ties all your projects and programs together is the idea of a brain, heart, and hand trust. Maybe you guys can tell me a little bit about that.
I think I'm the hand in the origin
Well,
story.
I mean, if you look at the origin story, I mean, you have Mel, who's clearly the heart, and you have Aaron, who's like the brain, right? He's figured out how things work.
Brainy
And James is like,
Aaron.
hand, I need to enable this. So if the origin story has that, and I think a lot of your projects already do, but maybe you can share a little bit about what it means and why did you pick this triumvirate, to use James'
We
word.
sound like three smells: hefty, brainy, and handy.
Okay, that's an image that.
Go on, Mel, on that note.
No, James, go first. Hand trust.
No, so I've seen a lot of good. I mean, my mantra in life, right, is flow, filter, and action. I believe in generating flow, developing good filters, and then to pick from the flow, and then to take action well, right, execute well. And nothing is more important to an entrepreneur, even if the idea is not original, to execute well. So when I heard this amazing nascent idea come from an old friend and a new friend, right, Mel, I was like, hey, as a concerned Singaporean, what can I do? Right? And the hand sprung into being and said, okay, guess what? My hand went in my pocket saying, here's the money. And on top of this should feed us for the rest of the time to come as if we do a good job. And here's what we can do, right?
Puts new meaning to put your money where your mouth is,
Indeed.
man.
That's exactly what it was.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
The Birthday Collective has had many iterations in the last 5 years, right? You've gone through your prompt. Maybe you can share a little bit on how the prompt thing works for us?
Well, I think where we came from was what would be interesting. So I think for the first one, we thought what would be interesting for something to look forward about, right? So we came up with the prompt of that.
Which is what's Singapore's next big thing?
That's right. And we got interesting people to write on a wide variety of topics, from data to education to sports to growing slowly and looking at how our growth must be more measured. So it's very interesting. And I thought we got a very different collection of essays, and that goes back really to the point you were making before about the heart trust, right? Because I think where we're coming from with the heart trust was really to reach out to this group of core Singaporeans who would feel strongly about the country, and as they do, and many Singaporeans out there do feel very strongly about the country, but how do we create a platform that brought us all together? And this platform was amazing because it was a bit of like a paid for kind of thing. So when Aaron connected us to James, and I met James at the dinner that we had together, the three of us, one evening. And straight away, I could see that he was a guy who was not only obviously business savvy, tech savvy, and was willing to write, but clearly had his heart in Singapore. And that way, I've met so many people who come forward, yourself including Cherie, who clearly have their heart for Singapore. And I think this has been a fantastic journey for the collective. So, to people out there who are looking at the collective from the outside, If your heart is for Singapore, if your heart is beating in the sense of that you want a better Singapore, then I think we can offer you something.
The first book you guys put out in 2016 was called What is Singapore's Next Big Thing? And I think that's very cerebral, right? It's very brain trust. Your second book is called What We Should Never Forget. And that to me is very heart trust, right? You know, you look forward, you look back. I mean, I know within it you have all sorts of things. And then you have the third book, which is The Roads We Take. And it's very journey. It's about, you know, connecting things and people and time. You know, the fourth one is Narratives Undiscovered and Underway, and then the latest one we have is Seeing Clearly. If you look at all the prompts, what do you hope to get from these prompts when you pick them? What is it you want your writers, your contributors, your programs, your workshops are all based on this? What do you want them?
I think that's an important question because the prompts are designed to be generative, right? They're designed to pique interest, they're designed to catalyze ideas. They're not meant to be restrictive, but they are designed to also give a certain unity across the different essays. And I think for me, the most important thing is that they help each individual writer to think about what is it that they can tell in their story that no one else can tell. You know, we're not interested in GP essays here. We're not interested in general expositions. What we want is the unique story that is the heart and the soul of the person who is writing them. And the prompts are designed to allow us to do that. Yeah, and I think they have done that in a lot of ways. Cherie, I'm sorry, I'm going to decenter things a little bit. You know,
because we're so collective, right?
Well, we're so collective, right? And also this year's book, right, the 2020 book, is all about decentering what it means to edit. You know, the editors have decided that there's no content page. One of them actually contributed to the book. So they've really kind of helped us to think about books in new ways. And I did want to stress that, you know, you mentioned the prompts of the first 5 books, but you've also been such a pioneer for a really key project as well, and you started your own origin story. So I think you should tell us a little bit about the junior book and why that's an important part of the Brain, Heart and Hand Trust.
I think that harks back to our very first meeting. We're at a boardroom meeting at a government facility. And I was heavily pregnant at that time. And I think you guys were talking about the launch. We were talking about the launch of the second book at that time. And I said, oh, how come we don't have kids in the book? And they're like, oh, yeah, because, you know, it's a different pool, it's a different ball game, which is kind of true. And I think towards the end of that session, we went around and you're like, hey, what is your dream and your hope for the Birthday Collective? Maybe because my brain was foggy from being pregnant, not sure. But I did say that. I said, I really hope one day we'll capture the voices of the children because I feel that they need a seat at the table.
Yes, and they really are the future.
They really are the future. And so I think, you know, having a platform that captures that for me was important. I think that came to fruition in 2018 when we decided to launch a junior book called The Roads We Take. And we found our first class of junior writers. And I think in many ways, they surprised me more than the adult writers. Some of the stories were really hard-hitting, you know, they moved, they're very moving. And then I think we followed up with last year, which was The Stories We Must Tell, which is kind of our version, our spin on narratives underway and undiscovered. Yeah. Yep. And I think the kids have been they've really put their mark on the birthday project, I think, for me. Yeah. A lot of their voices is very clear. They have very matured insights to things. And I think a lot of their stories will not just surprise and educate, but also inspire us. And I think I'm really glad we have them as part of our pool. I'm really, really glad. I'm looking forward to this year's book. This year's one we have Seeing Clearly, and we have our very first posthumous piece. So that weighs heavily on me. But also it brings me hope that sometimes, you know, a story that's a bit heavy can bring light in other places.
Sure.
So thank you guys very much. I think most people have had many versions of these origin stories. Thank you for setting the record straight. The next time Mel or Aaron or James or myself actually ask you for a taxi ride, you should think very, very hard because who knows where that will take you.
More origin stories.
Exactly. Sometimes
Absolutely.
origin stories spur origin stories. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Cherie.
Thank
to
you.
us.
Thanks, Cherie.
That's all the time we have for today. So episode 0 origin story. So the call to action very simply is, what's your origin story? And maybe consider doing it with us. Thank you guys.
Lovely.
See you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Collectively Speaking by the Birthday Collective. We aim to be a brain, heart, and hand trust for Singapore, focusing on the gifts we can offer to future generations. To find out more, visit our website at thebirthdaycollective.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Birthday Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, do subscribe and drop us a review.